All right, Braden, thank you for coming to the 8th Lane podcast.
Let's go.
I am so excited to have you here. I've been waiting for this.
No, I'm the one that's juiced. This podcast is growing like crazy. Lucky to be here.
It's so fun. It's been so fun.
That's sweet.
Okay, well, why don't you start out with just a little brief bio on like who you are, what your job is.
Yeah. My name is Braden Goimarac. I am a strength and conditioning coach at BYU, predominantly over track and field groups, distance groups, and I work with our track guys there, and then I work with some of the pro guys that have graduated from the program and have decided to stick around and continue their training.
So cool.
Oh, yeah. What I do is a very small part of their greatness. Like, I'm the one that's lucky to just be and work with them, work with those great athletes. So, yeah, it's a dream come true, just the atmosphere. I'm a Rocky Mountain kid, so I'm just I love to be here.
Did you grow up here?
No, I grew up in northern New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
A little town called Aztec. There's a big ski town in southern Colorado called Durango, Colorado.
Yeah.
I live like 30 minutes south of that.
Oh, okay.
So kind of a weird high desert mix, but in 30, 40 minutes, you're in massive Rocky Mountains and high mountain lakes and skiing and fly fishing. And so Utah and BYU matches my vibe and my lifestyle immaculately. So,
yes, this is like the outdoor mecca. We are so close to live.
Yeah.
We're so lucky to live this close to the Wasatch.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So did you always want to coach for BYU?
So I actually started years ago when I was still in college. I had done an internship of strength and conditioning internship with the BYU staff.
Okay.
And from that moment, I was like, I need to eventually come back to this place. And little did I know, it was just like, it would be a year and a half and I would be right back there.
So crazy.
Hired on full time with the guys. Like, yeah, a dream come true. Like a really true blessing. And so one of the big things too that I absolutely like, I was like, I need to get back to BYU. Was just going around to other schools and then like traveling around the country, kind of like working at other places as well. BYU is just so family oriented. So like work-life balance, immaculate. They want you to get your work done and do it very high quality. But it's also about, hey, life's much more than this. Go be with your family. Go make you. Go do your life. And so that's what I love about BYU.
Going there and working for them.
Yeah, exactly.
You just found that. That's awesome. So have you always been into strength and conditioning? Do you have a background in sport, or are you mostly outdoorsy guy? What's your background?
Yeah, so I grew up doing sports, football, baseball, javelin. That was kind of just...
That's cool.
Yeah, it was random.
Yeah.
I was just a baseball kid, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go throw spears, too.
You're like, this seems fun.
Yeah, and that was just in high school. And then coming to college, I just camped, fly fished, hung out in the mountains, lifted weights, ran. And so not really like a huge collegiate background in sports, but background in sports and a massive background of activity, right? Getting strong and conditioned.
Yeah.
So
moving.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So I want to jump into talking about your athletes. Recently, both Connor and Clayton qualified for the Olympics. Congratulations to them, to the whole coaching staff.
Electric.
Oh my gosh, I want to hear about the whole experience.
And once again, I'm just lucky to like it's hardly ever that like a coach makes an athlete great, right? Like these phenomenal freaks are we just help them and just push them along, but they're just great as who they are, right? So once again, I just run like the weight training and the plyos and some mobility stuff really for them. And I personally believe it is a massive part, but like it's so small in their entire overall holistic performance.
Yeah.
But still so freaking juiced.
So cool. So insane.
Yeah.
Build up to the like marathon trials, right? What was it like? Are you helping program like when they peak? Are you helping program their taper? Is that mostly Ed Eyestone?
Yeah, so they obviously have their run coach, Ed Eyestone, and I kind of just get like a general mileage map. And at this point, I already know like, okay, 16 weeks out from marathon, I know what their training looks like. 12 weeks out, I know what it looks like. 12 to 8, I kind of know what that block looks like. 8 to 4,
because
I know
you've
what
worked
that
with
block
them
looks like.
before a marathon before, or just because that's
yeah,
what it
so
looks like?
I hopped on and started like working and just doing basic stuff with Clayton last April, and then it got more of like official, like training them a bit more in the weight room May, June, July, August. The build up for Chicago in October. So I got a really good map out of all of their workouts, the intensities, kind of what they did, and kind of got a feel for how their bodies responded to each part of the block, right? And then my job is, how can I enhance that running performance through stuff in the weight room, right? Be it lifting weights, be it jumping around, be it just like a lot of different things, right? So, but yeah, so just having worked with them in the past, and then obviously I'm with the cross country team as well. So those guys are running, they're not running marathons, they're running 10Ks, right? Or they're running whatever they're running across country.
How different is the strength and conditioning for a 10K versus a marathon?
Similar, but different. And it's funny because exactly. And I think I say that because we were doing, I guess, just starting off from how I build a program.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And this applies to a lot of the college guys, and then especially the pro guys, because when I have fewer of them, so I can be a lot more in depth and I can be a lot more specialized, right? Rather than when I have 40 guys. I still do get a little bit more specialized, but it's harder when you have 40 versus 4.
Yeah.
Right. But I said similar but different because at the beginning of each block, right, I try to get what's called the DSI, right? And the DSI just kind of helps me get a quick little snapshot of how their body generates and utilizes force.
So what does DSI stand for?
Yeah, so DSI stands for Dynamic Strength Index, okay? So Dynamic Strength Index is, well, you have a little paper there, so you can look at it actually too.
We're going to try to throw these up on the podcast video if you're listening.
Great. But once again, I am so scatterbrained, I have to have it here. So I'm going to look at it as we chat. But the DSI, it's a calculation and it spits out a number, right? I have force plates. So you stand on these little plates that measure force, right? And then obviously it goes to my computer or iPad or whatever technology I'm using, and it's just force graphed against time, right? So I can see how much force they're producing in certain movements, how long it takes to do that, and then there's like almost 1,000 metrics, right? Like eccentric rate of force production, or like peak force production divided by body weight. Like there's just so many different things I can look at.
You just get a ton of data.
Yeah.
What movements are they doing on this plate?
Yeah. So like that's all the things I can do with that plate. With the dynamic score index, I say, okay, great. There's a billion things in the world I could look at. I'm going to focus on 2 things that put out one number, right? So I'll do what's called, I need a ballistic movement, right? So a ballistic movement is just any movement that is then followed by a flight phase, right? So like a counter movement jump, you're just load, explode, you're in the air, right? A plyo push-up, it's followed by a flight phase. Like you can say like a med ball throw is a movement and that thing is flying. It's a movement that's then followed by a flight phase. So I use the counter movement jump, right? So your hands on your hips, down on the force plates, load, explode. Just go, get it. Try to put your feet to the freaking floor, touch the roof with your head, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm just seeing, okay, how much force you're producing, how long does it take you to do that? Really what I need to do is peak force, okay? So again, I get your peak force from a counter movement jump, a ballistic movement. Then I'll also do I take your force from an isometric movement, right?
So like you're holding.
Exactly. So you're going to have yielding isometrics and then overcoming isometrics. A yielding isometric is where you're just like you're holding a wall sit, right?
Okay.
An overcoming you're not moving, but it's
Yeah.
not moving because you're holding that position. An overcoming isometric is you're trying to break or move an immovable object, right?
Okay.
So
So
you're
like
not
a
moving,
wall.
but it's
Okay.
Or like what I do, it's called the intermediate thigh pull. I think it's called IMTP, right?
Okay.
Intermediate or something isometric mid thigh pull,
Okay.
right? Isometric mid thigh pull. So you set up. We have a little rack that goes over the force plates, and you can set it up at different places. So I get it the bar right about mid thigh. You're basically doing a deadlift. You're just trying to pull as much as you can, but you still have your knees at certain angles and your hips at certain angles each time you do it. So it's like consistency, right?
Okay.
But you're just trying to move it and you're not moving because it's obviously immovable. But from that, I can get your body's max force production, right? So usually in an overcoming isometric, that is where you're going to be able to that's the most force your body is ever going to produce, right? Even more than like a super, super heavy 1 rep max squat, because this is like your body is giving its absolute all, okay? So I have your force from a counter movement, and then I have your force from an isometric mid thigh pull. So then I divide the newtons produced by your ballistic movement. I divide that number of newtons divided by the force produced in the isometric movement, right? So I divide ballistic force divided by max force, and that will spit out a number, right? So if you look at this number right here, it says, oh, this person, athlete A, table 1, athlete A produced 1,450 newtons of force in their counter movement jump, right? But on their IMTP, or their isometric, they produced 3,178, and that pops out a DSI, a 0.46. So that just means that I can, in a ballistic movement, when I'm trying to just exert force on myself and move myself through space and time, I can recruit 46% of my max force.
Okay. So like a DSI of 100 would be you could recruit all
100.
of your max force. Okay.
Exactly.
So when you're looking at these athletes' DSI scores, I don't know how you call it.
DSI scores. Yeah.
Okay. You want them as close to 100 as possible, or are different percentages more optimal for different sports?
Yeah. So thinking about it, you're like, oh, I would want to recruit all my force in a ballistic movement, right? But the sad reality, if you can produce 100% of your max force in just a jump, that just means you're probably not strong at all.
You're pretty weak. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So there definitely are training recs, right?
Okay.
So if you just look down, it's even the little highlighted part right there.
Yeah.
You have different scores. If it's
Okay.
less than 0.6, it has a certain training recommendation. If you can produce 60% or less, it's saying you need to get better at producing force in a ballistic movement, right? If you're 0.6 to 0.8, the literature says, you're good. Let's just train max strength and ballistic, right?
Okay.
And if if you can produce 80% of your max force and above on a jump, brother, you just need to get stronger, right? Let's just push some weight.
Yeah.
And so once again, I don't let these numbers drive 100%, but these numbers do inform me of, okay, so-and-so needs this much dosage of strength. Oh, so-and-so needs a little bit more plyometrics, right? And that's kind of really what I use this number for.
So it gives you a direction for where to focus their training.
Yeah, exactly. So it just gives me a profile. And I was doing these numbers, and I was doing this test, and I mean, it's very quick, right? Explosion and max force. And endurance runners really sometimes aren't used to training that way.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like what the 60 meter, the 100 meter, the 200 meter guys are doing, the high jumpers, the decks, right? Those guys are the strong, explosive, jumpy guys. And so Jared Ward's we're doing all these things, and one of the guys, Jared, comes up and asks me, he's like, so how much of what you would do with a sprinter would you do with a marathon trainer, right? And so this just goes back to how much of what you do with a 10K guy would you do with the marathon? I just told him, or no, he said, what would you do the same thing with the sprinter that you would do with the marathon guy? And I said, yes and no. Like at a certain point, the physics of moving yourself through space and right, it is kind of the same, right? Whether you're trying to jump 7.2, right, or you're trying to run a 100-meter dash, or you're going 26.2, you're exerting force into the ground to move your body forward, right? And so to a certain base level, it's the same. Whether you're a 60 meter runner, a 100-meter runner, a 10K guy, a 3K steepler, or a marathoner, or you're an ultra person, right? You exert force into the ground to move yourself forward. And so the biggest difference, I guess, between a sprinter, if I'm training them, I'm worried more. And once again, this is so boiled down, right? I'm just worried about physics, right? How can I get this sprinter to move themselves through space and time as fast and efficiently as possible? And then when it's with an endurance runner, I'm worried. It's about physics, but I'm also worried about them not stepping on their endurance physiology, right? Because if I give them,
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if I give a marathoner exactly what I would give one of someone that's running a 100-meter dash, right? The volumes of strength training and the volumes of plyos and jumping would probably start to have a negative influence on their physiology, as in their fiber type, really, right? So like there's practically zero evidence that if you're just like responsibly strength training, body type, body composition of endurance runners doesn't really get affected, right? Aerobic capacity doesn't get affected. But the one thing that can be influenced by what we do in a weight room is your fiber type, right? So I don't want to push someone that needs more of this type 1 slow twitch. I don't want to push those over to like a fast twitch. So in a fast twitch, you have a type 2A and then you have a type 2X, right? Type 2X is the most explosive fiber type ever, but it's, bro, it peters out so fast, right? But then you have a type 2A, twitchy, but it's fatigue resistant, right? So a lot of times,
longer.
Yeah, it lasts. Yeah, much longer. So if I just take exactly what I'm doing with a sprinter and I push it over there, my guys are probably going to start to influence their influenceable type 1s to move over to type 2, and then even maybe push the type 2s over to a type 2 type that I don't want, right? Okay. So once again, sprinters, I'm worried about the physics. Endurance runners, I'm worried about physics, but I'm also worried about not stepping on. I'm not even worried, right? I just want to make sure I'm not stepping on their physiology, right? So now the goal becomes how much of what I do with sprinters can I apply to distance runners, right? Before I start to influence that physiology in a negative manner, right? And really the only matter that I'm not worried about body comp, really, because we're not training like bodybuilders. Yeah. I'm not worried about aerobic base. Strength training does not ruin aerobic base, right? I'm only really worried about fiber type and influencing them in the right or wrong direction. Okay. So now my goal with the endurance runners, once again, is just, okay, I know what I can do with sprinters. Now how much of that can I take and just apply volume wise over to endurance runners? So similar, but different, right?
So probably sometimes based on like whatever numbers they're outputting, you might apply a lot of the same things to your endurance athletes, but in other cases, it might be completely different type of thing is kind of what I'm hearing.
No, yeah, exactly. And then like in the base training, right? Yeah, so like for example, if they score like a 6, it's like the time of year and where they're at in the cycle, right? Yeah. We can talk about this a little bit more later on. We'll also determine like volumes and types of movements, because at certain points, like from like 8 to 4 weeks out, I cut certain movements out and we only do certain things, right? And there's very specific reasons why. But yeah, so different parts of the year we train, we do have higher volumes of strength training and jumping too.
So ideally, how many times a year would be ideal for you for an athlete to
ideally
have a competition season?
Yeah, dang, that's a hard question because we don't ever deal in ideals, right?
True.
We deal with when the NCAA puts championships, and then also when the races are, and it's their livelihood, right? So they got to go get bread somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't really know when ideally how much it would be.
But right now, how much is it? Like for, let's say, Connor and Clayton, because we were talking about them initially, how many times do you have to put them into like a competition season?
Yeah.
Where their fitness is.
Yeah, for example, like leading up to Chicago, Chicago is the main goal, right?
Yeah.
But you're still running a bunch of little road races here. You're running like a 10K here on like the road racing circuit, right? Because like you can run these little races around the country, right? And where you get and the placing you get gives you an overall, like gives you points, and then you can move up in the overall scores and rankings and whatever. And so like I don't really plan around those, right?
Those are more workouts for them, probably, right?
Yeah, right. And they're cooking on those things, and they're working hard. And if anything, it's like, okay, the race is on Saturday. All right, we'll front load the week, right? And then they have 4.5, 5 days off, and then they go race, and they're fine, right? And the big taper, especially in the weight room, will happen like 4 weeks out from a marathon. But yeah, back to like dynamics. So I do that score, and it just kind of just tells me if they're below 0.6, I'll be like, okay, I need them to be a little bit more poppy, right? So we'll do a little bit more. I'll just toss more plyos into the program or some like loaded jumps, right? But obviously, once again, not to a volume that I'm worried it's going to be like start ruining fiber types or whatever, right? If they're 0.6 to 0.8, it's like, okay, that's a good range. We're just going to train strength and plyos pretty evenly, right? And then if it's 0.8 and above, yeah, we'll touch plyos because it's an important thing. But brother, we just got to add some more sets, some more rest time so we get higher quality strength work. Let's just get you stronger, right? And so before we even like start a program, I get these numbers because it just helps me gain perspective. It's not good. It's not bad. They're both like, for example, I did have one runner that was like close to 1, right? And another runner that was close to 0.6. They're still absolutely elite, right? So it's not good. It's not bad. It just tells me the story of how they move. And then it just gives me a better understanding of, okay, what can I do to maybe move you through space a bit more effectively, right? So
optimize how you're moving a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm not even sure what question that was. We just started talking, but that's DSI.
I think it stemmed from like we were talking about the sprinters versus the marathoners, preparing for both Chicago and then also preparing Connor and Clayton for marathon trials.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how much you want to say on the podcast or how much you can say, but do they do a lot? What type of training do they do with you? A lot of plyos, a lot of strength?
Yeah. So once again, the number, like the dosage of what they get is determined by their DSI.
Okay. So it changes.
And I take a DSI every 4 weeks.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So we'll grab that number, and then every 4 weeks we roll over, have a new program. So it's always a moving number.
Okay.
Right. It just tells me, oh, so this is where we're at now. Okay, cool. What can I, in the next 4-week block, what can I do to influence it?
This number. Is there anything, so our viewers and like the people listening to this, most of them probably don't have access to a force plate. So what are maybe some at-home tests they can do, or how could they test their strength, their like plyos?
The funny thing is I have these force plates, and it's fun, and it's really, I love it.
Yeah.
But also I probably could have told you exactly kind of where they would have fallen just by watching them lift and jump.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, an at-home test, Google normative values for max squat, right? And so that's going to tell you, oh, you're in the 70th percentile. That's not bad. But if you're like, oh, you're in the 40th percentile, like we already know you need to get stronger, right?
Yeah.
I mean, go try jumping.
Yeah.
Do you feel springy? Or tell someone to watch you. Do you look springy? Yes.
Tell someone to watch you.
Yeah.
Do I look springy?
Hey, wait, question.
Like, I don't
Do you
know.
look springy? Or if you feel so, like, yeah, like there is a science to it, but also you can be intuitive about it. Like you kind of, you know, like, do I need to be stronger? The answer is probably always yes, right? And if when in doubt, just train both. Go concurrent, right? Just go train equal amounts of bounce and plyos, as you do getting stronger in the weight room, right? So when in doubt, train both at the same time.
When in doubt,
don't worry too much about it, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe we can get into a little bit now because we're talking about programming and training. This is like an endurance focused podcast. So I wanted to like get your take on what are some key components people should be looking for when like in their own endurance programming. I mean, whether you're an ultra runner, maybe you're a marathon runner, maybe you do like long distance cycling. What are maybe a couple of things that people can
looking at it, good question. So you're asking what are some things that they could add to their own training to make better endurance runners? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess what are like the key components of like endurance training that you would say?
Once again, I'm just going to go back to the DSI, like, or the whole sprinter marathon, like get strong and get better at plyos, right? So
when you say get strong, I want to get specific here because
let's talk.
I meet people all the time that are like, I strength train all the time. And then I ask them what they do for strength training. And they're like, well, I grab these 5-pound weights and I do 20 squats and then I do 20 presses. And to me, that's not so much strength training.
Exactly.
Sounds like cardio.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. So I think I have a better understanding now of what the question is. And as a strength coach,
you're like, this is so loaded.
like endurance runners too, like there needs to be a stigma, like you are not fragile. Like, you know what I mean?
Let's repeat that.
Push weight and like push heavy weight. That doesn't mean like you're going to push heavy football player weight, right? That doesn't mean you're going to push heavy sprinter weight, right? You're not going to be doing power cleans and jerk and snatch and all these other things, right? Or you're not going to have 400 pounds on a bar, but you need to push your own, like your personal, strength. And that's got to be 70% or above. Okay. So just as just one 70% study
of your 1 rep max is what you're referring to.
So let's go back to remember when I was talking about, I'm concerned with physics, but I'm worried about physiology, right? So how much of what I can do with sprinters can I apply to the endurance runners without running their fiber types? So there's a study, right? And I'll try to put these up in like, I'll send you the links or the citations.
We'll link them in the description.
Great. So I'm not going to get into like the volumes of things, right? Like exact like tonnage or sets, reps, all like how much. But in the study they showed, I'm just going to read it word for word, right? And this comes from Muscle Fiber Type Transitions with Exercise Training, Shifting Perspectives, right? By Plotkin and Associates. The current literature indicates that resistance training performed at slower speeds due to the use of relatively high loads, 70% and greater of 1 rep max, 1 rep max, produces a shift from 2x and 2 to more of a pure 2A phenotype, right? So like it's going to, of your type 2 fibers, it's going to push them to the fast twitchers or the fast twitch fibers that are resistant to fatigue. So if you're an endurance runner, Those are good type 2 fibers, right? Because I can be bouncy and I can sprint up a hill. I can kick at the end of 10 miles or whatever. And you need to be explosive, right?
Yeah.
As an endurance runner, like you're not running slow for very long periods of time. You are running fast for very long periods of time, and you are closing it out hard to win championship style races, right? If you can't run fast and you can't close fast, you're not going to win a championship, right? And so like you got to be twitchy in some regard. So resistance training performed at slower speeds due to the use of relatively high loads, it produces or pushes fibers towards the 2A and a less shift in pure type 1 fibers. So then that just shows that I will be able to preserve my type 1, my slow twitch fibers, right? So the key is saying it's performed at slower speeds due to the use of relatively high loads. That person that is squatting 85%, they are trying to move it fast, but it's moving slow because it's a really heavy weight on it, right? So you don't have a 20-pound kettlebell, right? And you're just moving it slow and moving it fast and you're not doing it. Yeah. Like you are trying to push weight fast, but it's moving slow because it's heavy. So if you're an endurance runner, push heavy weight or get used to pushing heavy weight. That is like one of the biggest things and once again, I need to reiterate, like heavy weight's going to be someone else's 70 is different than my 70, right?
Relatively heavy weight.
Exactly. Relatively heavy weight. And what I love doing with my runners too, I don't even a lot of times prescribe percentages, right? I have their maxes and their numbers, but I'm not gonna be like, hey, go do 70%, go do 75% or 3 reps at this. I just say, hey, I love to use what's RPE, rate, which is just rate of perceived exertion. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being body weight easy, 10 being a 1 rep max hard, I want it to be a 7 hard or an 8 hard, right? And it really causes them, they're not worried about the weight. They have whatever you're doing. You're pushing a heavy sled, you're squatting, you're trap barring. I don't care. You can get strong in multiple different ways. Leg pressing. Just tune into your own body and say, am I a 7 hard, 8 hard? Be intuitive. Learn to be comfortable pushing weight, right? Because you're not fragile. You're like the most resilient athlete on planet Earth. Okay, you're running hundreds of miles. And so like, yeah, it's crazy because each step, right, your muscles are absorbing and producing or absorbing like a certain amount of force, right? And now just add that up. Each step, let's just imagine each step you're absorbing 1 times body weight, right? Probably not the right number. And you're a 140-pound runner. And then so each leg, right? So let's say that one leg, and you're running for 26.2 miles. One leg is 13.1, right? We're just going to cut it in half. You're taking 120 pounds per step for 13.1 miles. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it adds up. And if you're not strong, you're not going to be resilient. And so number one thing, and if you're not comfortable, hire Abigail, right? Hire her to be a coach. No, but get a coach. Get someone that can teach you how to do true strength training, because that is probably the biggest bang for your buck that you can do as an endurance athlete. You went to cross country practice. You just hit the trail for 3 hours. You were on your bike. You were swimming, right? What's moving you? Your muscles, right? And if you were doing like a 10K style workout or a marathon workout, whatever, like your muscles are what's moving you, and they're already working on muscular endurance, right? So why? Yeah, don't don't just come to the weight room and continue track practice or cross country practice, right? Like you just got so much of that exposure at practice. Like let's work on some other attributes. Let's fill your cups in other ways. Get on some things that you're maybe not great at, right? So I just don't want to continue. It's like drinking. It's like taking a shower in a rainstorm. Like your body's already so saturated with that stimulus, you don't need any more of it probably.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no way that you could train muscular endurance to the extent that you train it on the trails or on the track or whatever.
Yeah.
It's almost just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might work for like someone that, yeah, for anyone that is actually doing endurance stuff, it's not moving the needle at all.
I do want to go back to kind of your percentages versus like RPE.
Okay, cool.
I think when I started lifting, like actually lifting a few years ago, I read about RPE, I read about percentages, and I was like, okay, I'll just use RPE. And it wasn't until I started lifting with friends and honestly with my brother, and he saw what I was lifting and he was like, you can lift way more than that. And he threw on like double the weight I'd ever thought I could lift. And like, cause he was there, I like lifted it. So like you are way stronger than you think you are, and allow yourself to safely test like higher weights is just kind of the disclaimer that I want to put out there is like, allow yourself to like try the things you think you can't do.
Yeah. And I usually, for example, maybe a kid goes home in the summer, right? And I give a summer program and I'm assigning RPE. I'm only assigning RPE because we've already done that for 8 months and he's very comfortable with it and he knows what he can push.
He knows what it feels like.
Right. And it's like once you said like maybe you're doing RPE and you were kind of just lifting something and it wasn't until someone said, nah, slap some weight on that.
Yeah.
That you actually like, that's what like, I'm there and I say, hey, go do an RPE 6 or 7. But if I'm like, nah, dude, put another 5 kilos on, right? Yo, hey, put another plate on here and there. So, but yeah, love it.
Cool.
You're not fragile. Go for it.
So strength training, you are not fragile.
Yeah.
Let's kind of get into a little bit of plyo training. I think that's something people probably misunderstand. Give us a plyo rundown. What are plyos?
Yeah. So plyos are going to be exercises, not with weights, right? It's just body weight things that we can do. Maybe it's with weights. But they're movements that we can do that will enhance the stretch shortening cycle, right? So the stretch,
Yeah, explain the stretch shortening cycle.
So just brief rundown. Stretch shortening cycle is your muscles are going to stretch and then they're going to shorten, right? So you're just stretching and then contracting, right? And you're doing it repeatedly. So like when you're running, your muscles are stretching or elongating and then contracting, right? Stretching, contracting. And you can produce, like you can use plyos to enhance muscular force production, right? And there's, once again, like we could do an entire 4-hour podcast on weightlifting for running, an entire 4-hour podcast on plyos for endurance running, right? But just a brief snippet of there's multiple types of plyos done in different ways, at different tempos, at different angles and different directions for different things, right? But the general gist is I want to use plyos to teach my body to give the force produced by muscles. I want to give that work to my tendons, right? So I'm using plyometrics to enhance tendon recoil. Okay. So this example is not credit to me. It's from a guy named Tony Blazevich. And I just saw a thing that he had on YouTube and I absolutely loved it. Take your fingers, right? Just snap your fingers. That sound is not made by what's done right here, right? It's made by you're snapping and that finger is smacking against the hand, right? And it's making that noise because it's slapping it so fast and so hard, right? But let's just take that finger and try to make that noise right here, right?
Definitely.
You can't do it because I'm just using the muscles in my finger. Muscles are slow, right? But now I'm taking that same force and I'm pushing against this and they're moving fast because I'm recruiting tendons, right? A tendon is basically this. Just an elastic band, right? All I'm doing, very slow, right? But now I'm winding up, stretching, and I'm giving the work done by muscles to tendons, which are infinitely quicker than your muscles could ever be, right? So that's the entire purpose of what I will usually try to do with plyo training, right? Let's teach the body. You can be strong. That's a good thing, right? But now I want to offload some of that and maximize my stretch shortening cycle by improving tendon recoil. Let's teach my tendons how to use that force and release that stored elastic force. Because so many runners and people out there in the world, like, you have these in your feet. Like, literally, it's this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're not really using it, right? We're just flopping around as we're running. Let's stretch, recoil, stretch, recoil. Like, it just does so much work for you. It makes you so much quicker. So that is what I use plyometrics for, to teach muscles to give work to tendons, make that snap.
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah.
A few questions for you. A, does this help with like injury prevention, right? Because a lot of injuries happen in the tendons.
Yeah.
Would doing like preemptive plyo work help with that?
Yeah. So injury prevention.
Yeah.
I love it. A year and a half ago, one of the biomechanist professors that I also just work out, I give him programs and he works out with me. He's like, hey, I'm not really like, something came up and he just mentioned, he's like, yeah, it's more of like an injury prevention exercise, right? And I was like, here's the thing. Injury prevention is just about getting stronger, right? Outside of disease, but once
Disease,
again,
malnutrition,
boiling it down,
Yeah.
right? Injury just happens because a tissue experienced a load or a force that it was not prepared to handle. Okay. So so if you have a stress fracture in the femur, right? It's just your femur is experiencing too much force that it can't handle at that time, right? So one of the best things you can do is get stronger leg muscles, because that will absorb forces better. It's basically, here we are wearing Nike Infinities or massive, like, you can wear these long run shoes, right? Because what does it do? It's softer. It absorbs force. It puts less force through your body, through your bones and your muscles, right? Now, if I just get stronger muscles, I'm doing that same thing. I'm just absorbing and redirecting force a bit better, right? Or if I tear a hammy, it's just because my hammy experienced a force or stretch it wasn't prepared to handle. What can I do it? I can get it stronger. I can stretch it at those rates a bit quicker. You know what I mean? So same thing kind of with the tendons, right? If it is prepared for a force, it will withstand the force. But if you're not doing plyos or jumping around, your tendons and connective tissue isn't going to be ready for those forces, and it's going to break, right? So once again, injury prevention exercises is just
every exercise.
Yeah, it's every exercise. It's just getting stronger,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so in the lifting and jumping. So yes, to your answer, it can help with a lot of this connective tissue problems. And with runners and endurance athletes, endurance runners specifically, like, it's just getting stronger in weird little things, right? Like, how often do you actually try to train, like, truly strength train your adductors, right?
Yeah.
Adductor brevis, adductor longus. How do you target each? What are you doing, right? How do you actually strength train, like, your soleus, right? And then how can I actually get my Achilles stronger and prepped better to experience the loads of a quick uphill sprint on a trail, right? Or how can I prepare my patellar tendon for downhill running and pounding, right? It's just tendon prep through plyos, strength training prep, or muscle prep through strength training. So yes, plyos will help prevent injury. I hate prevent injury, because you're never going to prevent injury, right? But you're going to get it stronger, right?
Okay.
Until one day it will probably, especially if you're running, it will probably experience a force that it's not ready to handle and will get hurt, right? If you're running and you're endurance, you're going to get hurt, right? But let's make you strong so you can get back from that quick and have fewer of those, even though they're bound to happen.
Okay, I like that answer.
Yeah.
Second, I'm assuming these plyos are pretty sport specific, right? Like you would probably do different plyos for someone. I mean, you coach the cross country team and some of the track athletes, right?
Yeah, my main, like, I do have like I have the high jumpers, I have the pole vault, I have the decks,
So
right?
you got
the
a
multis,
lot of different sports.
Yeah, like a lot of different, like a vast range, right? But then I also have the 800 guys, the 15 guys, the 3K, 5K, 10K guys, and then I have all the pro marathoners as well, right? So there is a difference in what I assign to them, and mainly that's going to be in dosage, right?
Okay.
Like a high jumper or like a deck. The other interesting thing is strength and conditioning in the collegiate setting for track and field is much different than strength and conditioning with team sports, right? So with team sports, basketball, baseball, whatever, like the sport coach is coaching plays, right? You're drilling like ball handling mechanics, swing mechanics, throw mechanics, strategy, mental planning. In track and field, training is your sport. Sprinting is your so like the strength coach for team sports will have like they're in charge of all the plyos, they're in charge of all the conditioning, they're in charge of all the weightlifting, right? Track and field, the track coach handles the conditioning, and in like the multis group, she's the one handling the jump training too. Right. So I don't do so much of their plyos.
Okay.
But it's not done a ton. Or I handle it all really for the distance guys.
Okay.
Right. For the distance groups. But once again, I would probably be in dosage, right? Similar things.
You would do less plyos.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, exactly. I mean, someone that needs to sprint 100 meters or jump 7.2 over a bar, or go 18 feet up, like they need to be a bit more springy, right? Because that's all their sport is, right? And that's just a part of the endurance running. Once again, you need to be fast and springy, but let's focus. Like, it's not them.
These guys only have so much time, too.
Exactly.
Like, most of them are still in school that you're coaching.
Yeah.
Families, some of them.
Some of them have six kids.
Yeah.
6 kids.
Insane. It's crazy.
Dogs. Could you imagine running twice a day, 6 kids? You got to be a good person, man. Like fitting all. Like you're a dog if you're fitting that in.
Yeah. So again, like they have limited amounts of time. So I'm sure like maybe you would love for them to do more plyos, but just based on like, okay, well they have to strength train, they have to run.
Yeah.
Like,
and so I'll only get them, especially with the college guys, at certain times, right? I'll get them right after a workout, right? So like your body's already flooded with so many signaling proteins, right? So like you'll do a movement or an exercise and your body's like, oh, this is the type of movement I'm doing. And so it just like, it floods yourself with signal proteins, right? And it's like, okay. And then those attach to cells and it's like, hey, like adapt in this way, right? So you're coming in from crazy power run or whatever, right? And your body's flooded with these signals. Now I'm like, okay, great. Now I have these dudes flooded with these endurance signals. Now I need to somehow try to get them stronger and bouncier, right? Like, probably not the optimal setting. Once again, we don't work with optimal. We would just work with reality. Like I would have the dudes probably warm up, do their plyos before, run, do their workout, take a 2-hour nap, right? Come to weights 4 hours later, but that's just not reality if you're a college dude. So we just work with what we got and it's great.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're programming strength, you're programming plyos. Are there any other like important aspects of endurance training that you feel might be overlooked or that you would like to touch on?
The thing is, when it comes to strength, there are so many nitty-gritty things that I do when it comes to just strength, right? And when it comes to plyos, there are so many nitty-gritty things, once again, that I break up plyos and how I progress them or how I stack them throughout an annual cycle. But you pretty much, like, I am a fringe dude. Like, I love getting into like ice bathing and saunaing and red light therapy and how to use it when like the biohacking community, right? So like I do love those things, and I do like I have a lot of studies and I have a lot of opinions, and I don't tell the guys to do things. I just like, hey guys, guess what? This study was done with they sauna this many times a week for this long, and this is the adaptation they got. And do with that information as you will. And then they'll go sauna every day, right?
Yeah.
And so like there are a lot of things like that, but that's not really like my legal profession, right? Or my sphere. I'm just kind of strength, plyos, mobility. I mean, I do a lot of mobility. Like people are like, hey, this is happening. So I'll kind of like work a little bit of mobility, just like pain management. That's more of the athletic trainers, right? But there's definitely some things that we can do in the weight room, right? But really when it comes down to it, I mean, you have your endurance training, whether you're an endurance runner, you're a cycler, you're a swimmer, you have your sport, you're doing your training of your actual event, right? Biggest bang for it, but lift weights, jump, and then just do it consistently and do it smartly, right? If you can't, and doing it smartly is probably the biggest contributor to doing it consistently.
What is doing it smartly to you?
Yeah.
Maybe talk about that.
Doing it smartly. So once again, going back to what you said, like, am I actually training strength, right? What do you need to do to actually train strength? Okay. Once again, hopefully maybe we can have a podcast in the future where we get into like, hey, like this is probably like the volumes and the percentages and everything that you need to do. But like, am I actually training strength? Now, are my volumes correct, right? Because when I start to ramp it up on the track or on the road or on the trail, you can't give in every situation. Like if you're giving on the trail or the road or the track, you gotta take actual volume or even just perceived volume down in the weight room, right? And the big thing that, I mean, you have that little paper right there, and it just kind of has a discrepancy between running load and weight room load, right? When it's when you're like, let's just take the cross country dudes or a marathoner, I don't care, right? When you're in your base, okay, let's say these guys just got done with nationals in June, and they're just base running second half of June. They take a week, 2 weeks off, right? And then you're just getting miles, right? You're just building a base for 2.5 months, 3 months if you're some dudes. You're just getting mileage. I don't care if you accumulate fatigue in the weight room, right? So I have what I call my first accumulation block, okay? And this comes from, there is an Israeli sports scientist named Vladimir Issarin, and he developed kind of his training strategy and how he periodizes it for single adaptation athletes, so like rowers or sprinters or runners, right? When you're a team sport athlete, you need to like be conditioned and also jump so high and sprint. Like if you're trying to like manipulate so many different adaptations, right? When you're like with this right here, it's like we got one thing we're working on, one goal, one and so and then I've just taken what his principles are and what he's taught, and I've kind of just like try to like mold it into something that I like to work with and I have seen have success, right? So they're in like in a big base, right? I have my first accumulation block, right? I'm just accumulating basic adaptations, speed, strength. I guess with endurance runners, right? Marathoners, we're just working on strength work capacity, and just getting bouncy, right? We'll have like a 4-week period, right? Of just actually developing that bounce, that tendon recoil that I'm working on, right? And that is going to be our highest actual and perceived load, right? So that's like
in the weight room,
right?
While
when it comes
your
to
running
straight
load is
like
the lowest, basically.
Well, interesting enough, because like in a base, like you're gonna like these dudes are getting 100 miles plus a week.
Is this
right?
Mostly,
college,
this is their easier,
but it's easy
block,
miles,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like they're just They're
For
just
them, for us, it's massive. But for them,
it's
like...
yeah. And so like they're getting miles and they're getting 100 miles, 100 plus miles a weekend, but they're just getting miles, right? And so once again, I like that's the time, and we're so far out from competition.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're tired. Like adapt or die, dude. You know what I mean?
You're tired,
you're gonna be a dog, and you're gonna make like you're gonna be fine, right? Eat well, sleep 9 hours, 10 hours a night, and make sure you're hydrated, and you'll be fine. You'll survive. Okay. So, and it's only like 4-6 weeks that I'm doing this first accumulation block, right? And then let's not even imagine when they start to sprinkle in a workout a week, or they'll start to do less intense workouts along with their base mileage, right? We're still going to try to accumulate. It's basically the exact same thing as the first accumulation block, right? I'm accumulating strength. I'm improving tendon recoil through plyos. I'm just lowering the volume a bit because your intensity on the runs when they're lower like your first workouts of a build, like they're going to take a toll on you a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that volume down in the weight room. Right now, that block or that build, like weeks, like 8 weeks out, let's say, from a race, marathon, regionals or nationals, like things start to get spicy, right? Like like I've had dudes come in from a workout and I'm just feeding them honey. They're just eating honey stingers on the turf for 30 minutes. So they're just, you know what I mean? Like they're
trying to revive them.
Yeah. It's like, it's hard. Things get wild, right? Like they're extremely intense workouts. So I gotta take a lot in the weight room. Like they're giving on the road or the track. I've got to take and scale back in the weight room. Right. So one way I do that is I exclude any eccentric movements.
So no lowering of a squat.
No lowering of a squat. I don't even do squats at that point.
Okay.
A transmutation phase is what it's called. That's kind of like the term that Isserin has given it, right?
Okay.
He says, hey, now we've developed all of these general adaptations. Let's make them a bit more sport specific, right? And running is all about gait, right?
Yeah.
Walking, right? It's like I want to do a strength movement that utilizes gait. Okay. So what I do sled work. That's my big thing. We push and we pull sleds, right? So the eccentric portion of like a lift is where like fatigue is generally going to come from, or soreness is generally going to come from, right? So if I can axe that out, boom, I have big, massive win. These dudes are not going to be ever sore from the weight room ever again, right? During this training period, they'll be sore, but it's because they're absolutely getting it on the pavement or the track or the grass where they're training, right? But I'm taking that fatigue away while I'm also maintaining strength, and I'm transitioning it to a more sport specific through the gait, right? We're just pushing heavy. Like some dudes are putting 10 plates on a sled and pushing, right? And everything where we have kilos, right? So like, and each massive plate is like, it's 20 kilos. It's just under 45 pounds, right? They'll put 10 on, and we do them once again in specific ways at different angles. And I want your ankle and feet to do different things, right? For different reasons. But we only do the concentric or the contraction part of a lift, the pushing part, the up portion of a squat. If you don't have a sled, right? Put it on the pins, just go up, and then don't worry so much about coming down controlled. Like don't drop it, right? But come down and then just go up again. So I take that out. So I can offload so much fatigue that way and make it a little bit more gait specific. And my plyos, especially when the marathon guys, the volume goes down, but the intensity goes up.
Of the plyos.
Of the plyo, right? So
how do you mean intensity goes up?
So yeah, no, great question. I guess with just with how springy it is, right? A lot of times in the beginning of a build when I'm trying to like learn new patterns or feels. A lot of tendon recoil is just like it's patterns, right? Teaching your body how to like where to stack the foot under the hip, how to place, like where do I want contact to be? And a lot of times we'll do that with like band assisted movements, right? Or just like you're not learning it with your entire body weight. And then we'll wean off that and you'll go to body weight, and then we'll just have to do those things a little bit more explosively, peppy, a little with a bit more rhythm. That's putting a little bit more force through the tendon. So I guess the intensity would be I'm putting more force through the connective tissue. So the volume scales down, but the intensity goes up a little bit. And it's just I'm sprinkling in, right? Putting force through the connective tissue, improving that tendon recoil.
And this is in that kind of like 8 weeks before competition.
Yeah, this is like 8 to 4 weeks that we do concentric only training, and I do it with the sleds, and I up the plyos, take the intensity or the volume down a ton, right? And then let's say the taper. We start to like do a taper in the weight room from 4 weeks out from race day.
So a taper in the weight room, are you taking sets per week down? Are you taking reps per set down?
Yeah. So we only, I guess, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. I don't do sets or reps or anything. Well, I kind of do. So the main movements, like your main movers of your legs, hip flexors, knee extensors, all the stuff, right? Hip extensors, so glutes, quads, hammies, all of that glute, quad, hammy work is done isometric. That's all we do. So it's like 3 sets of 30 seconds or 3 sets of, and I'm doing different things, right? Like a split squat iso. Or I'll
Are they weighting that split squat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we do isos. Like isos is my jam. I love it, right? So we'll do iso. We will do 1 iso a day every training year round, right? Just because.
Why do you love isos so much?
Yeah. So isos are just
isometric. Isometric.
Yeah.
It's like a holding movement, right?
Exactly. We talked about the overcoming ones earlier. We're trying to move up. These ones are going to be yielding, right? Well, sometimes. So they're mainly like 98% yielding. Okay. You're just holding a position like a wall sit or like a Spanish squat, you could call one, or like it's a split squat iso. Or like a leg extension iso, right? You can be in a leg extension machine and just hold it up. Or we do bands. That's how we do ours. And it's just, I mean, you could get into, it's just so good. Like you can maintain strength, right? And you're really offloading fatigue that way. So we can maintain strength that last month before a race, offload basically all perceived fatigue. But then it's just so good for connective tissue.
Okay.
Right. I mean, once again, I could get into like, well, this study shows it does this much collagen synthesis. That's what your tendon, that's what your connective tissue made of, collagen, really, right? But the real answer is like, why does it make them better, and why do they make them like? If someone's hurt, we do isos with their like connective tissue, right? It just makes everything feel better, helps it heal, and people are like, why do you do it? It's just like, why does it work? It just does. You know what I mean?
Why does it work?
Yeah, like and they're starting like once I could get like it does this and this, but it just does. So just do it, right? Yeah. So we'll do.
So that's the taper. You're kind of shifting.
So
from maybe strength movements or the sleds to
So
isometric.
Remember, so we were doing like the full spectrum of strength training. Right, we're doing eccentric, isometric, concentric. We're doing the whole shebang. Then we take out the eccentric to kind of, I want to continue to build strength, make it gait specific, right? 4 weeks out, whether we about to cook on the track or the road or the trail or whatever. So I need your body. Let's get ready to just be fresh.
Yeah.
Let's go even a step further. ISO only, right? And like it's still hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we're still working. Like an average person to come in here do our ISO session, they'll feel it, right? Like for sure. And they'll have a hard time walking out of the weight room. But these dudes have been doing it. It just feels so good. Offloads a lot of fatigue, and it's just so good on connective tissue and for the muscles. So yeah, glutes, hammy, quads, everything's ISO. I need those bad boys to get ready to roll, right? And my most intense plyos happen, right? So once again, drop it just a bit. but the volume just about how much we're doing, but let's make them a little bit even more explosive. Okay. So let's get the poppiest that we can be, the springiest that we can be. Get that tendon as prepped for moving fast on race day as we can.
And this is all the way through even
So,
race week?
Yeah. So I used to actually, like, for example, if you're going to be an elite marathoner because you have the most unreal mindset ever, right? Like, I used to tell these dudes, like, because I've worked with a lot of endurance athletes in a lot of different places, right?
Yeah.
And some people are so worried about a taper. They're like, hey, I can't do this 2 weeks out because I have a race in 2 weeks and it really means a lot. I'm like, I think you could be okay, but whatever. So I kind of, and I regret doing this, just giving people the option. Like, hey guys, we'll come 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out. If it's a 2 week out, if it's like 2 weeks away from the race, that week is optional, right? Because like they just fought. They're like, hey, I need to be fresh. I don't want to do this, la-di-da. But the elite marathon guys, I said, hey, the first time we ever did a marathon together, in the past, I was like, hey, so week 2 is optional, right? And they're like, bro, what do you mean? I was like,
they're like, well,
yeah, like I'm trying I'm trying to be and so they showed up, right? And it's just kind of like now it's we only offload race week completely. Like we do stuff, and once again, it's intelligently, it's smartly, but we are still doing stuff, movements, strength movements, isos, plyos in the weight room 1 week up to 1 week out. Like if it's race week, okay, we're not doing anything, right?
Are you doing
but
probably
if it's
mobility?
But if it's 8 days away, yeah, they can't. If when it comes to mobility and stretching, it's like, if the athlete likes it, I'll do it, right? If it like helps put them in a mindset where they're like, all right, I'm ready to rock, or my body feels good, we'll do it, right? If not, I don't worry too much about it, right? I mean, there's like a lot of debate or just like literature that's just like, actually stretching does nothing. But then I also have met some works with like current NFL running backs, right? The most explosive athletes you've ever met. And they're like, yeah, but like I have to stretch before every practice. And like, so you're out there stretching hamstrings. Like, are you really going to tell like this freak talent, like, hey, don't stretch, don't do like, why? If they like it, let them do it. Who cares? And help them with it. So I'll help them with the mobility and stretching if they're into it. If they're not, whatever. A lot of them are though. And so I do. But yeah, up until a week out, we are doing stuff. So like, once again, we're hitting the hip flexors, we're hitting adductors, we're hitting post tib, we're hitting anterior tib, we're hitting gastrocnemius, soleus, and that we stopped doing like traditional like weight movements to hit that, or we even use a lot of cable work to hit all that stuff, right? And we just start using bands. All right, hey, let's make it more explosive. Let's make the hip flexors boom, boom, boom. Let's drive. You know what I mean? Less volume, everything's banded. But yeah, we rock up until race week.
That's awesome.
I know. And once going again to like, I just love the mindset of elite.
Ugh.
They're just absolute dogs, right?
Like where did it come from?
Yeah.
Where did you come from?
Yeah. Like there's times like they'll be in Texas, right? And they're flying back and it's 6 o'clock at night. They're like, yo, I'm getting back. Like, I want to get my lift in. I'm like, all right, bro, I'll beat you there. You know what I mean? They got off a plane. They haven't seen their family. And I'm not saying skip your family, right?
Yeah.
But they haven't seen their family in like 2 days, 3 days. But they drive straight from the airport after doing events in Texas or wherever they are across the country, straight to the weight room. We crank. You don't got to be there forever, right?
Yeah.
You only got to do the important stuff. We get stuff done and then they're out. But like consistency. So like, going back to your question, I don't know, 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, it was, what are some things that you want to do for endurance at, like, things that move the needle? Lift weights, and lift them heavy, you're not fragile, and do it in different directions and different things to hit everything in your body. Jump, do plyos, and then just be consistent. Give it months, give it years, because that's what the best are doing. And so, yeah.
I think this is beautiful. I hope we like get this to put it up on to the podcast. I haven't ever seen something like this on paper. love it.
Yeah.
I think it's also super applicable. Like the hybrid training movement is super big on like everywhere right now. And I see a lot of people just like max loading themselves both in running and weightlifting all the time. Like they're always just pushing as hard as they can in both disciplines. And I mean, you would be the expert on this, but knowing what I know, it sounds like they're kind of doing themselves a disservice, not kind of playing to, okay, I'm going to really push in the weight room here. I'm going to scale back on running here.
Yeah.
And then,
well, I mean, you just look at like most, like the freak influencer hybrids out there. Okay. They spent literally a decade just as gym bros, and now they're getting to be runners. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like they spent a decade getting strong, and now they're like, okay, I can lose a little bit of strength, and now they're focusing on running while maintaining strength. Like there's definitely ways I feel like you can build both. It's just going to take years. It's
also
going to take a decade.
Some strategy too.
Yeah. It all, once again, definitely some strategy.
Yeah.
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah, you're right though. It's not like the.
Or you look at Ryan Hall. The guy was the most, I mean, he's the best American marathoner in history, right? And now he's yacked, right?
Like,
but I mean, but like maybe his mile time's like a minute 15 slower than it was before, which is kind of a big decrement in the endurance world. But he spent like 20 years like as the most elite runner ever. And now he's just putting on pounds. So he's good at running because he's been doing it for decades, but now he's also yacked out of his mind, right?
Yeah.
And so, this is going to take time, but you got to be intelligent about it. But I love the hybrid movement. It's sweet.
Yeah, it is cool. It's awesome.
It's fun.
Just to be respectful of your time, I want to wrap it up. I hope we can do like a couple of kind of specific podcast episodes on strength or endurance. Like people definitely drop questions or like recommendations in the comments. I'll link Braden's Instagram, so if you guys have any questions, like hit him up. He knows his stuff.
Or I act like I do. I act like I do.
He knows his
I don't
stuff.
really. No.
I want you to leave the listeners who kind of identify with what you're saying, or anyone who like listened to kind of your programming tips. I want you to leave them with like something that's actionable that they can apply this week, this training block, this year. What would you leave them with?
Yeah. So I'm going to go on a limb and say that most of the listeners are going to be, it's an endurance audience, right? So you're probably like running consistently or doing whatever endurance activity you do consistently, right? Maybe you're lifting consistently. I don't know. But if you're not lifting consistently, scope out 2 30-minute sessions a week, right? And just figure out, okay, if you can't do, let's just do one. Okay. But you got to schedule a time. Figure out when you can fit in 30 to 45 minutes worth of strength training. Okay. So that's just like one actionable thing. The second actionable thing is find strength movements that you like. Okay. Because if you hate squatting, dude, don't squat. Okay. I personally love squatting, right? So like, and my guys like to squat, whatever, but like just because you see homegirl or home guy over here squatting, like, bro, you don't have to do that. Right? Go leg press, go gobble, like, or find a variation of squat that you do like. It doesn't have to be back squat, right? So find a time that is actionable, like 1 or 2 times a week that is realistic, right? But then make a list of things that you love to do, right? What are some lower body workouts that you love to do? Do you like trap bar deadlift? Do you like leg pressing? Do you like pushing sleds? Or do you like carrying really heavy backpacks up mountains? I don't know what it is, right? So find a lower body exercise that you love and then just load it. You're not fragile. Figure it out. Let's load that. RPE 7 for 6. Let's start off lower, right?
Squish yourself, but
So I think that's one thing that has helped my athletes. For example, I'll just say squat of choice. What do you want to do today? You don't know? or you do not, like, go figure it out.
Yeah.
Do something that you love, right? So
Yeah.
2 things. Or just figure out a time to work out 1 or 2 times a week. Because if you want to be great, man, if you're lacing up to become the greatest of all time on the trail, you want to touch a podium, you want that medal, like, you have to find these times. Okay. And then you have to find things that you enjoy, or it's never going to be consistent. So just find one lower body exercise that you love, and then just learn to load it.
I love it. I love it. I think another thing too that I loved that you said multiple times is you are not fragile. Like, the weight's not going to break you.
Yeah.
And lift
But
the
once
heavy
again,
weight.
you were the most, like, dude, you are so resilient. You are getting out of bed, spending hours doing this thing that is so hard. 98% of the world hates it so much because it's so freaking hard, and you have dedicated your life to it. You are an absolute dog, right? Apply that mentality in every aspect of training. So, like, you're a dog on the trail, you're a dog on the road or on the track. You may be skinnier than the linebacker at the football room, right? But you are strong and resilient. You're an animal. So don't be afraid.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Braden.
Yeah, thank you.
You were great.
So,
I'll link your Instagram in the description, all the studies that you talked about, and hopefully these diagrams as well. Thank you so much.
Love it.